Overly tight submental muscles are likely what has prevented your jaw growth if you don't have proper jaw growth, and if you are trying to develop your jaws further, this will prevent that because the floor of your mouth is essentially all muscle, soft tissue, fascia. Okay? The bottom of your tongue is essentially the floor of your mouth. All these muscles blend in together. And in a previous video, we were talking about how using that back third of the tongue is really activating all this deep musculature and fascia that connects up into your cranial base. And so when people pull their tongue back, that's described in a previous video for like a really deep mewing experience. A lot of people experience that their jaw, their mandible, is going to get pulled back as well. And that makes complete sense because if you look at the muscle connections here, the genioglossus muscle, all of this is attaching right up into your mandible, not only at the front but around the sides. So as you pull the tongue back, the mandible is going to get pulled back as well. And this is really what I mean by saying that the floor, like the floor of your mandible, the area in between both sides of your mandible, is essentially your tongue. And so if you've understood that, say your upper palate, this nasomaxillary area, that can be shaped by the tongue, while your mandible, the entirety of the space in between all this soft tissue is literally your tongue. So that's probably going to be the main force, which is if it's properly tensioned and properly behaving in a flexing style, like with your breath, as whole body breathing describes, then you're gonna get widening and lengthening, proper development of the mandible. But if all these suboccipital or submental muscles, sorry, if all of these are tight while your mandible, like when you're in your earlier growth stages, while this is trying to develop outwards, but all of this is too tight. So when you pull your tongue back, you can feel it's actually quite tight down here. Well, your mandible is bone. Bone reacts to Wolff's law, and bone is actually quite flexible still when you're in when it's living tissue, because it's a collagen matrix. Okay, it's collagen and calcium, and collagen is quite flexible. It's the calcium that makes it rigid, and your bone, it's not a brittle thing. It's not when you see in a, it's not even a cadaver. It's like when you see in like a dried bone of an animal, or you might see a model that's like a plastic bone, but that's not really what bone is like. Bone has flexibility to it. It has flexible fibers running all the way through it that respond to the forces that are placed on them, and that results in deposition of bone, removal of bone. And essentially, it shouldn't be too hard of a leap to make that if you understand that the upper palate is going to be shaped by the soft tissue up there, while this lower jaw, the entirety of this area is soft tissue. And we see this as a complex. So this is Meckel's cartilage. This is something that essentially your mandible, when you're in the womb, is going to develop around Meckel's cartilage. It's like the base structure that the osteogenesis is gonna occur around. And you have the cartilage, you have nerve tissue, and you have bone all developing around the same time. And in whole body breathing theory, um, as we've seen, like we're trying to wake up all of this for proper growth, not just because it connects now, but we see that in development, this is all one connected complex. So if you have a mandible and a lower jaw that's not properly developed, essentially your entire deep fascial, entire deep muscular complex has probably been tightened or held back to development in such a way. You can even see this is a, I don't think they were trying to show somebody recessed when they were making this image, but they're showing somebody who is not properly fully developed. And you can imagine that their Meckel's cartilage, it's not actually their Meckel's cartilage because that's in the womb, but the flexible bone and this region here, which is supposed to expand out, and we say on every single inhale, it is going to expand out. Um, if this is too tight, if this is constricted, if the fascia in this region, if the nervous um, signaling in this region is not proper because it's not moving properly. And one of the reasons it's not moving properly is because it's all too tight. It's actually supposed to all move on the inhale. Well, you're gonna end up with improper development. Okay. And this goes even deeper when we're talking about when you look at an embryo, like a really, really early embryo, you resemble a fish. Okay, essentially a fish, a shark, or an elephant, a giraffe, and a human, monkey, and everything. At an early embryonic stage, we all have a very similar, pretty much the same embryo. Okay, and this bundle down here, which in a fish would become the gills, right? So this would become breathing tissue. In you, it becomes mandibular tissue and the structure of your face. And we propose that the nervous system connections, they're still there in a vestigial way. So all of this area is still expecting a breathing input. It's still expecting some sort of breathing rhythmic motion. And when that doesn't happen, not only is your fascia too tight, your muscles are too tight to allow the bone osteogenesis to occur in this outward expansion like it's supposed to, but all of the signaling, so say with John Mew's cell volition theory, that all of the signaling and mapping that your brain is supposed to get of how to develop this area, that's not happening either. It's also going to turn you into, it's going to take you out of that parasympathetic state because essentially, if there's no movement here, this constant signaling that you're breathing and things are functioning properly, that's not going to happen. Your vagus nerve runs right through this area as well. So it's expecting certain signaling as you grow up and during your day-to-day life. And if this region's tight, if it's constrictive, if it's traumatized, if it's not developed properly, you're not going to get any of the signaling to remain calm and be mentally healthy and be in that proper rest and development phase. And also, it's going to likely be evident in your physical development that you're not properly developed. Furthermore, the the mandible as it develops around Meckel's cartilage, and then once you're in your teens, adult, in your childhood, you're going to have a mandible that's flexible and is going to want to continue to grow up and out. But this mandible remains not only through the nervous system, but also through its actual structures. It remains connected up into your cranial base. So if you want development of the skull, you have to have development of the cranial base. If you want correction of the TMJ issues, because this is back here, this is your airway, right? You want airway correction, you want TMJ correction, you want physical appearance correction, entire body structural correction. Then you have to see that all of this is attached and works as a single unit. And when you can start waking up those attachment points, then you can feel yourself where you're tight and you can use the leverage because all of these ligaments, right, in the spine of the sphenoid, this is a hard tug on your sphenoid. And there's also like very thick muscle here, sternocleidomastoid, all the deep neck musculature. Everything attaches up into the skull. And fascia has an extremely high tensile strength. Ligament has an extremely high tensile strength. And you can get results that are comparable to removable appliances just using the tensile strength of these ligaments and this fascia. And we have training for that, and the link will be in the description for that below. And we have communities devoted to this, and the links for those will also be in the description below.